On today's episode of the Hustle the Day podcast, I have Corey Berrier. Corey has lived 1,000 lives, it seems like. Everything from slinging cocaine to starting a podcast, running a business. You're going to want to buckle in for this one. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustle the Day podcast. My name is Trent, and I'm very excited, very blessed to have Corey Berrier here today. Corey has his finger in so many things. I don't even want to try and introduce you. So, Corey, why don't you jump in here and tell me about yourself?
Hey, what's up, Trent? Thanks for having me, dude. I appreciate this. Dude, you're right. I do have my hands in a lot of things, and it's crazy because this crazy stuff that we're in. Ironically, I was supposed to start with a medical device, the head of the head of the sales department of a medical device that's fairly new and up and coming. Or not really up and coming; it's really new. And so I was supposed to start that when this whole shit went down, and I've been working on this deal for a couple of months now. And so now it's like, what do you do, right?
That's a good question.
Well, I mean, because, you have to go to doctor's offices and visit doctors. Well, you can't do that shit right now. So, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy.
It is. So you have some other projects you're working on in the meantime as well. You do some coaching, correct? And then you've got your podcast, the Successful Life podcast, which is awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but give me a little background about Corey before this medical device thing didn't happen.
Well, so it's going to happen, but it just took a little bit of a back seat. But leading up to this, so Trent, I'm from Mayberry, so literally from a little bitty itty bitty town like that was on like the Andy Griffith Show. That's where I grew up.
Okay, and
so it was super little town. I grew up in a great household. We I had great parents. They split when I was 12. Basically what happens to everybody at this point.
Right.
I also I was a fat kid, and so I got picked on a lot. And what that did, Trent, is that taught me a lot of things. I was climbing onto a diving board when I was 12 years old. It was between my 6th and 7th grade year. These girls asked me to jump up and down, and when I did, they thought I was cute, and really they were watching my boobs bounce up and down. And so they asked me if I needed a bra. And it was probably one of the most humiliating days that I can remember as a child. And so what that did for me is it embarrassed the fuck out of me. Hopefully I can cuss on here. It embarrassed the fuck out of me. And so I decided that summer to go on a super strict diet and start exercising. And I lost the weight. It helped that I grew a little bit over the summer, and I haven't gained that weight back since. I've had a lot of other struggles through my life beyond that, but that, being fat and being picked on is no joke, dude. I wound up, I think, probably drinking, and I don't really know why I started drinking so heavily, but I did. Got a bunch of DUIs, started doing drugs, had lost my license 30 days into getting my 21st birthday. 30 days I got into DUIs. And so I've lived pretty much a crazy, reckless, younger life, slinging cocaine and drinking and, importing pills from different countries and all kinds of crazy shit. And what comes with that is a lot of fun. There was a lot of fun with that. then there was a lot of bad days too. In 2005, Trent, I got caught with cocaine, 4 ounces of cocaine, and that day, of course, I lost everything. I got locked up, but at the same time, I really thought I was going to prison, to be honest with you. And if I would not have been white, I bet you I would have. And that's pure just speculation. I don't know that for sure, but there's a lot of statistics out there that show, that it is favored for certain people. It could be that, right. Even, God, I saw it the other day. I think there was certain type of hair color and eye color was convicted almost every single time.
Wow.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how I got off on all that whole thing. But anyway, so in 2009, I finally sobered up, and I haven't had a drink since.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I'm sure you've gained a lot of life experiences out of that, which you can share with others and help others through. And I mean, you've lived a lot of lives.
I have lived a lot of lives. And to be honest, I don't even know how I'm even sitting here, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I remember I was sitting, I moved out to Las Vegas for a year in 2000. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting on a couch with these two guys. And there was one guy on my left. Now, remember that I came from Mayberry at this point, right? I'd gone to Charlotte to school, flunked out, DUIs. But I'm still a kid from Mayberry. So I'm sitting on a couch with these two guys. They're both covered in tattoos. I mean, I have a lot of tattoos. These guys were like straight up prison. I mean, literally prison guys. And so there's a guy on my left, Ed, and a guy on my right, Stormy, I think is how it was. And we're watching television, and they're both meth heads, right? And so, like, bad meth heads, like no teeth, and it was a fucked up situation. There's a lot more that goes into this, but for time purposes, I'll keep it short. And so we were sitting there watching whatever on television, and the news pops up, and these two guys are on the fucking news. Both of these guys are on the news robbing a casino. Huh. And I'm sitting there like, what? I'm not sure. In my head, this is what's going on in my head. I'm not sure if you need to run. I'm not sure if you need to just sit here. I mean, my brain from left to right was just being jarred to death because I didn't know. I didn't know what the hell was about to happen. I mean, I just saw these two fucking guys that are wanted on the news, and I'm sitting beside of both of them.
Yeah. That would be a bizarre feeling.
It was a bizarre feeling. And fortunately, I got out of there. They didn't even say anything. Literally didn't say a word. Like, they acted like they didn't even see it happen.
That's crazy.
It makes no sense. None. So there's a couple of crazy stories for you.
Yeah, no kidding. So you talked a bit about, who kind of drove those negative behaviors starting back to age 12, but who would you say has influenced you most on who Corey is today?
Well, if I had to narrow it to one person, I guess it would all have started with Tony Robbins, I guess, because really, he's the reason this whole thing actually, I have to really take that back a notch because, and people hate to hear about The Secret, but the reality is that's what I watched the first time. And that's what got me into my personal development journey, even though I don't agree with everything about The Secret. In fact, I don't agree with a lot of it, but it doesn't matter what I believe and what I judge. It just matters what it did for me in my life. And for me, it put me on a path that I wouldn't take back for anything on this planet. And so that led me to Tony Robbins. And I'm not sure how it led me to Tony Robbins. And that's the truth. I really have absolutely no idea. But once I started listening to him in journaling, and this goes to so I can go ahead and get into this story if you'd like. This is one that's a little bit more dear to my heart, and this gives you a better idea of what Corey has been going through since July of 2018. So 2017, I sold my personal training business and opened up a hormone replacement clinic. So testosterone replacement and Botox, Juvederm, like a med spa, basically.
Yeah.
And it was so cool, Trent. It was so fucking cool, dude. It was, it was like, I thought this was exactly what I would be doing for the rest of my life, to be honest with you. Like, I love like that kind of medicine. I loved the access that it gave me. It gave me access, and maybe it's more of, not, I shouldn't say me access. It didn't give me personally necessarily access, but I did own the clinic. So I kind of had access. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it was interesting because, first of all, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. I'm going to tell you that right now. Big motherfucking difference opening a clinic like that, and then opening a clinic with employees and investors and shit like that is far different than my personal training business.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about, the liabilities, and it's just a whole entirely different animal. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, so a client and myself got together and decided to do this. Now, I had been doing telemedicine prior to that, which is what qualified me, so to speak, to start this clinic, is because I had been doing HCG weight loss. I had been doing HCG for male reproduction. And I had access to this through telemedicine. And I bought into a program through a friend of a friend that ultimately fucked me, but I'll get to that. So I did that and made my money back in less than 60 days. It was stupid easy. And, and I mentioned this before we started, but I don't sell anything that I don't believe in. You're not going to catch me selling you a Dr. Pepper, because I don't fucking drink Dr. Pepper, and I don't think you should drink Dr. Pepper. So I'm not going to sell you Dr. Pepper. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe it's an integrity thing. I don't know. I feel like if you aren't congruent with what you're selling, people can tell. And I don't feel that way. I know they can tell. Yeah. I mean, there are, my wife is a micro expression fucking practitioner or something. What that does, do you know what micro expressions are?
I do not know.
It's not uncommon. There's very few people that I ask that question and them know exactly what it is I'm talking about. So when I say micro, think about the word, right? Very minute, small facial in body language. But you can, if you there's, oh man, I wish I could remember the show. If I can remember it before the end of this, I'll tell you. If not, I'll send it to you. But anyway, so the show it essentially there are certain facial movements that you make if you're guilty. Okay. And my wife knows all that shit. Mm-hmm. She's she can watch people on television and pick out what they're thinking before they say anything. Okay. It's pretty fucking cool. Yeah. And she swears she doesn't use it on me, and she's a terrible liar, but I don't know. I don't know how much truth there is to that or not. But anyway, so I was telling you about the clinic.
Right. And you don't do anything. You don't sell anything you don't believe in.
Yeah. Maybe. And then maybe it's reinforced by me knowing that micro expressions are a real thing, and people, a lot of people, maybe not a lot. I don't know what the percentage of people actually know what that is. But anyway, it's pretty interesting, and it's really hard to detect. Very hard. It was a challenge for me to try to help her through this stuff, because it was, when I say micro, you don't even see it. It happens so fast. So, All right, I gotta stop talking about micro expressions.
So you're at the clinic.
Yeah. So we're at the so we moved into the clinic, and I did everything on my own, meaning except the hammer and nails to build out the inside of the place. I didn't do that part. Fortunately, my partner at the time is a construction dude. He owns a construction company, so that wasn't an issue. But I did everything else. I ran every single thing except for he controlled the finances because he put in most of the money. I put in a shit ton of sweat equity and some money.
Yeah.
And so in 2000, so in July, my wife had handed me a book that said, "Okay, fine." It said the title's "Okay, fine, I'm grateful." And basically what that means is she handed it to me saying, "Hey, like, you should probably take a look at this because you're not the most positive human on the planet." And so I did, and I started journaling in that. And these sequence of events have really taken my life to a whole different turn that I would never expected. So in 2018, October 2018, my partner walks into my office and tells me he is not going to pay me anymore. And so I'm like, how? I don't even know how that works. I'm like, literally, like, what the fuck does that even mean? And so, long story short, come to find out, what happened was, and I didn't realize this until months and months and months later, in lawsuits and court and law attorneys and shit. But what had happened was, a girl that I let go, he was fucking her. And so she essentially had painted a picture that I was this person that I really wasn't that person.
Yeah.
Anyway, so all that stuff happened, for a great reason. And that reason was that I walked away with nothing, but I also walked away with no debt. That's
good. I mean,
in this situation, it's really good. So that was just it was an awful time for me. And when he told me that, two reasons: that day was tough for me, and I was supposed to buy my ticket to go see Tony Robbins that day. And I had, I'd been journaling and I had already, I had talked about it for months leading up to it. And I knew I was going to that event. And when he told me that, it just crushed me, dude. It crushed me because this is my business. It crushed me also because that was something that I needed in my life, and I knew I needed it. I didn't know why. I just knew I needed to go. Yeah. And so my wife, obviously he didn't pay me, so we're a whole significant paycheck short. And so my wife had called and made a deal with the girl. Her name's Angel. Actually, I can't remember her last name. Doesn't matter what her last name is. But Angel helped my wife out with the cost of the ticket, and she called me at work, my wife, and asked me to sit down. And when I opened the email, I mean, it was a flood of feelings and emotions, and just I've never had anybody do something that nice for me. That I've recognized anyway. And Trent, I don't know what it was, but I went to that event, and since then, my life is taken such a different turn. And I say that because, one, I've ventured off into several different things. I've some good, some not great, some didn't do anything but waste my time. But that's okay, because I have to go through these things to get to where I know I'm going to be. And I'm there. Time just hasn't caught up with me yet.
Yeah.
And so, so I have to believe that everything that you and I are doing on this earth right now is taking us to a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look back on the past, I mean, it's easy to see the dots connect in retrospect, obviously we're living in the present. We can't see those dots connecting right now, but I have faith that they are connecting for one reason or another, for a better purpose. So I definitely believe that train of thought.
Yeah. I have the same thought process. I know for a fact there's something far bigger than I can even put together. In my future.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And dude, I'll tell you, part of the reason that I know that is because there have been so many things. I've gone through every one of Tony's CDs, which are all his books.
Right.
And I mean, when you say every one of them, you're talking about weeks of shit.
Yep.
Months for me, because I was slow. And I just embodied a lot of what he says to do. And a lot of what he says to do stems from, as we all know, Think and Grow Rich, which is where everybody in our personal development space gets it all stems from that book. And that book stemmed from something, I'm certain of that, or maybe not. But, there's been so many things in my life. Speaking of Think and Grow Rich, this is a great example. So I think you'll enjoy this story. One day I was sitting outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and my wife's a wedding photographer, and I was waiting for her to finish, and I was getting ready to start a mastermind. I was hosting a mastermind the next day, and we were going to start reading and going through Think and Grow Rich. And so I was listening to the first chapter because it had been a little while since I had listened to it.
Right.
And so I was going through it, and he was talking about, the Model T and the V8 and all that stuff, and what a challenge it was and how long it took to get it done. And so when he said that, I thought, I wonder how they got a V8 engine in a Model T. And then I thought, well, shit, I'm not even sure if I know what a Model T looks like. And Trent, I'm not even kidding you. Swear to God, I was on an enclosed farm with a gate, right? And we're sitting there. I'm sitting there. My wife's out doing the pictures. And 30 seconds after that thought entered my mind, this is exactly what was pushed out of the fucking garage. Completely, fully restored Model T.
Wow.
And I don't know, dude. There's not. I can't. That's just not a coincidence. I'm sorry.
No, definitely not.
So I keep it there because it reminds me of what we can do and what our minds can do. And if you just visualize stuff and you think about what you're going to do in the future, and you think about what you want to do, who you want to help, who you want to serve, who you want to do, whatever it is you want to do, and you just see it you don't have to know how to do it. You do not have to know how to do it. And I think, and maybe you can, you can speak on this, but I think that a lot of people, they just don't start. And so a lot of people just don't start, and therefore they never get any further than where they are. And I know that sounds kind of silly, right? They don't start and they stay where they are. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. And I'm sure you've seen that in your life or somebody's life around you, right?
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that Think and Grow Rich up. I've got a copy just sitting right over here, but I've recently reread it, and a few months back, and one of the first stories he talks about wanting to be an apprentice to Edison, I believe it was, and he just kept going, had to get this apprenticeship no matter what it took, even though he had no plan. He knew it was going to happen. Well, I took that and I was like, you know what? I'm going to work with this specific individual. It's like, I'm going to do some sort of business with this individual. I've never met them before. I've never, made any connection with them. And, a minute or two after I had decided that, as I'm reading this, I get a phone call from a friend saying, hey, I just managed to get a meeting with this individual. I think you could bring something to it. Would you like to join me? Yes, absolutely would. So that was my Model T moment right there. and using the same book.
That's all it takes, though, right? It takes one time like that for you to say, okay, dude, like, you know what? I know there are some people that halfway believe in this stuff, and there are some people that are all the fucking way in. And now I just maybe I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Now I'm all the fucking way in.
Right.
You know?
Yep. I'm definitely an all the way in person in that regard.
Yes, for sure.
So let's rewind a little bit. You've kind of explained some of your business ventures that you've had, throughout the years. But how did you end up from the couch in Las Vegas to starting your personal training business, or were there businesses in between there that you had started? Lots of them. Okay.
So, I shouldn't say lots.
I guess what made you decide to start your own thing, your own business?
It's a great question. Actually, it was on a podcast the other day, and I didn't even think of. Somebody asked me how, what was the first time you made money? Mm-hmm. So, Trent, when was the first time you actually made money? Go back as far as you need to go back. And if you think about that, unless do you know? I know. Okay. What was
part of my entrepreneurship journey? Selling baseball cards at a local park at age 6.
Okay.
I had some extras and went and sold them to people at the park.
There you go. So how long have you realized that day? How long has it been? Because I just stumbled across this little, I guess really the first entrepreneurship venture, quote unquote, that I ever did was selling golf balls. I would go and collect golf balls because we lived on a golf course. And so I would go in the woods and I would just pack in the golf balls, and then I would wash them all and I would take them and sell them.
Nice.
So, my entrepreneurship journey, I guess, really kind of started there. And then I started delivering papers when I was 16, and I didn't really think about this till the other day also, but I had to pay for the papers first and then deliver them. So that's how it works. Like, you pick them up and now you're responsible for how many you pick up. So technically that was taking a product, buying it and reselling it.
Right.
But I didn't think of it that way at the time. And then, my illegal entrepreneur journey, which I made a ton of money doing. I'm not recommending anybody does that by any stretch, but I did that successfully for several years. And then I decided that's when I started training, when I got sober.
Okay.
And I got fired. I got fired because my soon-to-be ex-wife decided to tell the people above me I was the number one trainer in my entire 10 club family, so to speak, and I was single-handedly bringing in more money than any trainer in the company every single month except for one.
Wow.
And so really I thought I was untouchable. So I started a shell company because I wanted to not pay as much taxes. I mean,
okay.
I thought it was a smart thing to do. Well, what happened was my ex-wife showed that to the people I worked for, and they fired me. So I didn't have much choice, Trent, but to start my own business because I'm a convicted felon because of the drug charge. I didn't finish college. And what else am I going to do? I mean, you can't get a job or not one that I would want. So I had to pivot, I had to pivot into, and really I just tried to use whatever gym I could use at the time. And I would just drive wherever I had to drive, do whatever I had to do. I mean, it's that simple.
Right.
And, selling comes fairly natural to me. Like I said, if I believe in the product and so were there struggles? Of course. Were some great times? Absolutely. But I would say that was probably like the first legitimate business that I've had in years.
Okay.
Yeah, since that whole cocaine incident.
Well, I think the important part of that story is that you didn't use that as an excuse. You're a convicted felon, you can't get the job that you want. You didn't use that as an excuse or a crutch. You used it to keep going, and in spite of that. And I think a lot of people that I know who have been in similar situations use it as an excuse and don't progress their life because they're resting on that excuse. So I've got to applaud you for going out in the face of that and starting your own thing.
I really appreciate that. Those two things, Trent, have probably been the two things, the felony and not having a college degree, probably have played more mind tricks on me than anything. Because there was always this feeling, when I was applying for jobs a long time ago, almost 11 years ago, I just knew I wasn't going to get the job, whatever it was. I knew I wasn't going to get it because I was a felon. And so therefore I didn't get it. Well, we both know what happens with thought. If you think you're not going to get the damn job, you're probably not going to get the job. Right. And so, which is exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's great that you, like I said, that you kept going at it. And look where it's led to you, where you are now. You started a very cool podcast. And I can't even begin to name off all the people that you've had on there. I've just sat there, we started honestly at a similar time, and you've just been going at a breakneck pace. And I see all the time, on Instagram, hey, here's my interview with this person. This is my interview with this person. It's like, wow, he is on fire with this. How is it that you got into podcasting?
Well, it's a pretty interesting story also. So I bought everything, which everything consists of a mic,
right.
And it sat on my desk for probably about 3 months, really. And so I had bought my, my tagline or whatever you want to call it. What the hell is it called? The RSS thing.
Yeah.
And so I had a podcast. It just wasn't really anything on it. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to Arcade Live in October, I ran across this guy when I was leaving, as I was leaving. Actually, so a couple of things. I ran across Ryan Williams as I was leaving to go to lunch with Tony. I was going to lunch with Tony Watley, Marcus Aurelius, and Zachary Babcock. Well, I didn't even know who Zachary was. I had no fucking idea who he was. And so, and I didn't really know. I knew Marcus and Tony, but not like, I didn't know them like that. That was the first, that weekend was the first time I'd ever met them. But we had mutual friends. And so, whatever. So I went to lunch with them, and it was just such a surreal conversation because I'm sitting, Marcus, you know Marcus, surely.
Yeah.
So, and Tony both are, both have a great podcast. Both super great guys, and Zachary as well. Actually, he's such a great guy, and it was just. So let me scroll back for a second. So Ryan, I saw him in the lobby, and started talking to him, got my picture with him, and whatever. And so I just asked him. I said, "Hey, would you like to be a guest on my podcast?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd love that." I'm like, "All right, dude. What do you do now? Because now you got to do saying yes, and you don't even have a podcast." So, you can only imagine the thoughts were running through my head. What if he goes to look to see how many episodes you've done and there's nothing there? And like, what? And he's a busy dude, so he didn't give a shit what I was doing with my podcast. Like I'm thinking I'm like this important person. And so, after that weekend, Trent, and I had got that first yes, I just started reaching out to people. And I had met Sean Whalen while I was there at Arte Live. And, I talked to him for a little bit, and he agreed to be on the podcast. And I was like, and that's, for me, that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
For Sean Whalen to be like, literally, I think he was the third or fourth person on my podcast, which, God, if you go back and listen to that podcast, it was terrible. And I say it was terrible because I just didn't know. Dude. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I had to assume the position, so to speak. I had to be the person to lead the other person if it was gonna be my damn podcast. And so it somewhat came naturally to an extent. And I don't know, but it's weird because I don't have a lot of things that come natural. I don't have, like, I've never been great at a specific sport. Like I was good at golf younger, but that was about it. And the reality is that, I don't know. I've never had anything that I've just really, really, really thoroughly enjoyed as much as I do my podcast. And it's learning about people like you and learning about how, where you've been and the struggles that you've been through. And no matter who it is I'm talking to, except for one person in all of my podcasts that I didn't get anything out of. One person.
Interesting.
Well, I agree. It is interesting. I have a feeling now I've probably interviewed 80 people. Right. And my guess is that the common denominator is on my side on that one. So, whatever. But I enjoy it, dude. It's interesting. It's cool. We don't make any money via the podcast, and is it time consuming? My God, it is super time consuming. Can be if you allow it to be. But I love it, dude. I really, really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, this is something I never thought I would do personally, and once I dove into it, it's like this is a lot of fun. There's great networking going on. There's great conversations going on. There's a lot of positive to it, and people are getting things out of it too. I hear from my audience all the time of, this was great, or I enjoyed this conversation. I really resonated with this person. And that's an amazing thing to be able to, you feel like you're doing something, bringing some good to the world by having the podcast resonate with others.
That's so true. One, and two, we're getting knowledge directly from the person. Like, and I didn't look at it. I didn't know to look at it that way. Well, I'm glad I didn't look at it that way at the beginning, because my intent would have been probably very different than what it was. And my intent was really just to share these stories with other people. That's it. Like, literally, that's it. But I've gotten so much more out of doing this podcast than anybody I've interviewed. I can guarantee that. Yep. Guarantee it.
Yep. Absolutely. And I agree.
Yeah,
I definitely get more out of the podcast than my audience probably does. I think it's been a fantastic opportunity. So I'm glad we can share that experience and know that, we're both getting something out of our time that we're putting into this. And it's really awesome. I love your podcast. You, like I said, you've just been on fire interviewing people, and it's been really cool to see.
I really appreciate that, dude. It's, there's going to be a lot of other cool shit coming down the pipe, I have a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, as we climb into this thing, and, it's crazy because this gives us an opportunity. And again, I didn't know any of this going into this. If I would have, I probably wouldn't be here, because knowing me, I probably would have I may have done it for the wrong reason,
Right.
and I really don't want to believe that that's the case, but I probably just wouldn't have worked out. The truth is it wouldn't have worked out if that's what I thought. If I thought I'm doing this selfishly, I don't think it would have worked out. And I know there's no way I would have the conversations with the people that I do if it was anything other than good intentions,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think listening to your story, I mean, you've got a crazy, interesting story. And I could honestly take so much, I could take different bits and pieces to answer this next question out of it. But I want to hear your personal take on, since this is the Hustle of the Day podcast, how do you personally define the word hustle?
I can give you a great example. It was when I got home from RTA Live, dude, I probably sat in this office pulling my hair out for probably close to 19 hours a day. And I had a little bit of help from Zach. I had a little bit of help from our RTA brother, Fabian. He helped me more than anybody at that point. Do you know Fabian? TG Genetics? Yeah. He's such a good dude. So he, I met up with Fabian when we got to St. Louis, and I didn't really know Fabian other than some conversations or voice notes that we had talked, between each other. And he's become a good friend of mine. He's such a good dude. And, he spent it may have been hours. I don't really know how long he spent, but anytime I had a question about something really fucking stupid, he would just, he was patient. He answered the questions. He was cool. It was just the right people were put in my life at the right time. But 19 hours a day trying to figure out technology and, drinking a gallon of caffeine every hour trying to stay up, it was, dude, it's days like that you are hustling your fucking ass off. Mm-hmm. Or it's the day that I get up on time, and which is 4:30, 5 o'clock this morning. It was 1:45. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But anyway, so, but this morning's a great example. 1:45 or 10:02, something like that. I was laying there and I couldn't sleep. So I'm like, fuck it. I just went ahead and I went in my office, put my headphones on, and started editing, because you and I both, if you edit your own shit, it's not easy, especially right now with this shit going on. Like Zoom's jacked up every other, you and I have had zero issues, but there's been so many calls that I've had that are glitching out and making stupid noises, and not on my Zoom, it's Zoom's end.
Right.
And so you got to edit all that horse shit out. And I didn't have to do that stuff before.
Right.
I didn't have to do any of that stuff before. And it's time consuming.
For sure.
So, I love it, dude. I love the podcast, and I love the days that I can say that I hustled. And there are many days that I can say that I didn't hustle. Especially during this craziness that we've got going on. I'll share one more story with you. This is a great example of this. Is exactly a hustle mindset, in my opinion. You tell me if you think differently. And if you do, that's okay. But when this whole thing started, I realized that, one, my diet wasn't the greatest. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is when you get off track. Sugar, for me, it's sugar. Sugar throws me so far off, it's not even funny, and it takes me out like crack. I mean, it's crazy. And so I was on the phone with my buddy Caleb, and he said, hey, you should do 75 hard with us. And I'm like, I'm not doing 75 hard again. I've already done it once and completed it. And I said, I'm not doing it again. And he was like, you really should think about it. And by the end of the call, because there was a little pressure added to my plate, I was like, fuck it, I'll do it. Whatever. And the reason I made that decision is because I felt like I was incapable of getting back on track without it. Not incapable. I wasn't incapable. I wasn't willing to get back on track. It just wasn't my time. I just didn't want to get back on track. And my stomach was acting crazy. And so I decided to do 75 hard, but that's not the interesting part. This is the interesting part. About, let's see, we were, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 days into it, maybe. Mm-hmm. And we were on a Zoom call with like 9 or 10 other people. My wife was on it. And some guy, his name is Wes. Excuse me, I don't know his last name, but he came on and he said he was finishing up a 5-day fast. And my wife, somebody on the call perked up and said, "Oh, we should do a 5-day fast. All of us should do a 5-day fast." So my wife's like, "Fuck it, I'm in." And I'm like, I was like, I'm not down with that. Yeah. And of course, so you can always, just like the first call, anybody's listening to this and want to sell me anything, just get me on the phone for long enough. So by the end of that call, I'd committed to doing 5 days of fasting with just water and 2 cups of coffee every day. That's it for 120 hours. And so I told myself at the beginning of that, I said, it doesn't matter that you're already doing 75 hard. It doesn't matter. It's 5 days. It's 5 days. Yeah. You can do anything for 5 days. So we did, and we finished it. And it was I'm super proud of myself, super proud of my wife for finishing that, because we didn't cheat. We didn't skimp. We measured everything, meaning our coffee, right? Everything. Fucking coffee. And so, after coming out of that, dude, my taste buds are still the cleanest they've been in 42 years. And I feel and look better than I have probably in 42 years. Like, we both lost 13 pounds. Wow. And so the reason I'm telling you that story is because those 5 days, Trent, were hustle. And when I mean hustle, like it was all I could do just to get through the day, because you're zapped, dude. You don't have any energy, and you're working out twice a day. So, I mean, it was just, I was shot.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what is more of the hustle than just, getting through the fast is the fact that you're doing this when everybody's at home snacking on things, and, you see the memes all over the place of, summer's canceled this year because of the quarantine, my summer body's not going to be ready and all that. But like you, I'm in the best shape of my life right now during this time, because I just last week finished 75 hard. And so it's just one of those things that you can take these opportunities of, these unique times as a positive, or you can take it as a negative, and it's entirely up to you.
And at this point, like, you should have taken it one way or the other by now, because guess what? It's about over. And I'm unbelievably, I don't say how proud I am of myself about anything, because I just don't recognize those things. But that was a decision for, even though my hand was forced both times, it was still a decision that I am so grateful that we made, because, my wife's, our diet has completely changed. Like, everything has changed. And for her, my wife has had a eating disorder when she was younger, and almost died because of it. And so for her to have battled that all her life, right? And to see such a massive change I mean, for a woman that's 5'8" to drop 13 pounds on any body size
Yeah.
that's a lot for anybody to drop in 5 days. But for her being in shape as she was, she's now like she's no question in the best shape of her life. No question.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been super cool, dude. It really has.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited that you're showcasing hustle in so many different ways, because I mean, like I said, looking back at your story, thinking about our conversation, it's like I can think of it in a dozen different instances, it seems like. So you definitely exemplify it, and I'm honored that you took time out of your day to be on my podcast. But I want to ask you one more question before you can plug all your things that you're up to. But I want to ask you, what is it that excites you about the future?
Oh man, there's a lot of things really, Trent, because, the first thing I would say is that, we're going to see new businesses pop up out of this thing. We already are seeing new businesses pop up. We're going to see the way we do shit is going to be a little bit different. And I don't know how much different. I don't think it's going to be so drastic that it's going to be like night and day. We're not, right. I just don't believe that's going to be the case. I just don't. And I don't think we need to. And I'm not being insensitive to somebody that has the virus, because I feel bad for those people that have it. Trust me, I really do. At the same time, our country is literally sinking by the minute, because financially anyway, because fuck, nobody's working. Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's on the roads. Nobody's buying gas. Nobody's doing anything. And it's just a time, dude, that right now, I was just telling my wife this morning, I said, we're never, ever in our lives going to see anything like this shit happen again. I said, we probably won't see this for another 100 years. Nobody will see it for another 100 years, if ever. Like, I don't know if this has ever happened. I don't think it has, right?
I think the closest thing you have is the Spanish flu pandemic 102 years ago.
Okay, well, there you go. I didn't even know what that was. So there you go. I mean, did they shut the country down?
You know what? It's actually funny that you mention it. I think it was in Think and Grow Rich. He actually did talk just briefly about it, how we may be diverging a little too political here, but they talked about how the thing that was causing the most issue with the pandemic during that time was the newspapers printing scare headlines. And so they actually went to the mayor of New York, went to the press and said, you cannot publish any more scare headlines. And they agreed. And suddenly the pandemic went away. And so I think it could definitely relate to today with a lot of some of the scare headlines that you see regarding this pandemic. And so I think the parallels are there quite a bit in that regard.
Well, Trent, you're right. I mean, you're such a great point. The news media outlets have they didn't cause the pandemic, but they caused the pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't cause the virus itself, but they might as well had. Because if it hadn't have been for them, like you just said, we wouldn't be in this shit. Like, it would be just like last year or a year before, whenever the fucking swine flu came through and our H1N1, everybody got sick. Not everybody, but a bunch of people, evidently. And guess what? Well, it's over. Like, no, we're probably never going to hear about the fucking swine flu again, because now we're, I guess, got our antibodies up and we fight all that stuff off. Like, next year, when this shit rolls back around, we're not even going to know it hit. It's going to be the exact same shit.
Yeah. So. Yep, I get it. Well, I want to give you a chance to tell people about what you're working on and where to find you, and I'll make sure to include links in the show description as well. But tell us where to best find you, Corey.
Sure. My website is just CoreyBerrier.com. So CoreyBerrier.com. Not the best website on the planet, but there is a website there. And then usually I'm on Instagram. And so just at CoreyBerrier. And then my podcast is the Successful Life Podcast. And you can find that pretty much at any of the outlets. Any of the podcast outlets, Spotify, iTunes. I don't even know. I don't list off the rest of them because I don't know. There's a bunch of them, but
Right.
So that's where you can find me. I would love for anybody to come out and listen to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. I'd love any feedback anyone has. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. That's where you can find me, and I also coach. So I guess the best way to a mindset is what it really boils down to, regardless of what, kind of the situation is. It really, boils down to where's your mind and what are you thinking about, and how can we change that, to get you back on track.
Very cool. Well, I'll make sure, like I said, I'll put all the links to those in the show description notes. But I know I've gotten a ton of value out of this. So I know my audience has gotten a ton of value out of it. So I want you to take that value, get out there, and hustle the day. Thanks for listening to the Hustle the Day podcast all the way through. I really appreciate that. I just want to let you know that I help small businesses with their online strategy. So if you or anyone that you know needs help with their online strategy and owns a small business, I'm your guy. Go ahead and connect with me at Trent V Bray on Instagram or TrentVBray.com.